Today my goal is to drive the Z, but we do have a lot of work to do before we can get to that point, because in the last video we left off with getting the engine running for the very first time. I wanted to get the engine running before I put all my nice parts on it and cleaned it up, because I didn't want to waste time or parts and getting them dirty for no reason. Now that we know that it's good, we can put all of our new fresh stuff on it. And I also have to finish welding the subframe, because right now it's only tacked into position from when I had to notch it. So step one is pulling out the engine, and then we'll finally clean the engine bay. I know you guys have been saying, why didn't you clean the bay? Why didn't you? Blah, blah. We're gonna clean it, all right? We're gonna clean it up today. Well, after tearing apart some of the interior and yanking on this harness, I was finally able to get the stock Z engine harness out of the car. Now I can take this out completely, and I can start spraying some degreaser in here so I can really clean the bay up. Use the pressure washer and get this dialed in. Actually, before I get ahead of myself, let me weld the subframe first before I start spraying water on it, and then it becomes full of surface rust. I welded the top and bottom of the subframe where the points were butted together, and that looks pretty good. Now this is too much of a gap to just fill in with weld. I wanted to show you guys what I'm going to be using. This is a lot thicker than what the subframe is, and this is what the subframe is stock. Also, fun fact, the top layers of the subframe, which is what this is from, is thicker than the bottom layers. I'm not exactly sure what gauge it is, but just thought that was interesting. Got the subframe welded up. That looks very nice. That'll do the trick. And now what I can start doing is chipping off this nasty gunk. It's probably been there for 30 years. Look at that. Oh, it's so gross. You can officially coat the entire engine bay purple power, and it can also do that to the engine as well. Man, that's so satisfying. It's gonna look so much better. I'm curious how much will come off this KA. We got the engine bay and the KA cleaned up. Superb. This looks so fresh. Oh my gosh. Almost factory fresh. There are some paint chips, so it's not gonna be perfect, but oh my goodness. This looks way better. Same with the engine bay. Very happy with how it turned out. I'm sure I have black schmutz all over my face. It's all over my arms. But it is about to storm. Here's a quick tip if you guys use a hoist. If you tighten the pump, you can lift, hold it for a second, and it'll stay. That saves you a lot of time pumping it up that far. Since this is hopefully the last time we're gonna mount this KA in the Z, I'm gonna put these engine to transmission brackets on. They go, oh, not that one. They go right here. Just cleaned them up a little bit. They were full of grease. And this one goes on the other side, of course. I cannot find where I put the bolts for the rest of the kit, but luckily I have my spare bolt fin, and I found a couple candidates, because you don't want these threads to stick too far through where the threads would bottom out before the washer. It helps to keep all your spare bolts. Well, it looks like on this side, I'm going to need to take off the slave cylinder, which I need to replace anyways, to even get access to this bottom bolt. Well, now I'm not too sure. Will the head of a bolt really fit behind the slave cylinder in between the transmission? That's really close. Crusty. Yeah, that's not threaded. Interesting. Found these two candidates with the hex head. I definitely prefer to use a flange bolt, but in this case it's not an option. All right, before we go too crazy on that, let's just test if the slave will still fit. I don't think it will. The thread hole is not lining up. How do they do this from the factory? There is a slight notch in the back of the slave, but that's still not enough. Guess we'll have to come back to those, but for now we'll just run this side. After pulling this engine in and out probably 10-15 times now, I figured this would be a good time to add a handle to the hoist, because it's so annoying trying to maneuver this thing, just pushing it by the frame. Since we have this extra handle now, since we replaced the hydraulic pump in the last video, figured we can use this one. That's not going anywhere. This is gonna be way easier to use now. Man, this engine looks so much cleaner in here now. How satisfying. Well, I guess I can finally take off this chain. It's been on here for months. I didn't realize the stock valve covers have metallic in it. It's like glistening in the sun right now. All right, well, the next step we need to do is replace this water pump. I have a brand new OEM one here. And the way that you install these is there's actually no gasket. So you have to make your gasket out of RTV or whatever gasket material you decide. Looks like this one was still good, but still gonna replace it with an OEM one. Always like to compare before and after. Looks the same to me. This thing looks really clean on the inside. Put this on here. Alright, next thing we want to do is put on the exhaust manifold. But we need to take off the old gasket first, otherwise it'll be an exhaust leak. I think that was the only one left on there. Yeah, these three are good. Oh, and this one's missing a stud, which I didn't realize, so we'll figure that out later. I picked up these two pieces. This is actually really cool. I didn't even know these existed. So this is a, obviously, NA header, and it goes out to a downpipe flange, which is like the same area you would have your turbo go out. And then I picked up this downpipe, and they actually match up perfectly. So when I go boost this KA, I won't even have to change up my exhaust. I'll have a downpipe ready to go. Is that not the coolest thing? Never seen anything like that. But we do have new exhaust gaskets to put on here. This actually has an old gasket still on there, which I need to take off. But we went with the best. Some more OEM stuff, and I thought it was so strange that these are individually wrapped. Most exhaust gaskets and intake gaskets are one huge piece, but hey, it's something different. And I also got the OEM exhaust washers. They're kind of beveled to help it seat better on the exhaust holes, and also OEM nuts. I think these are locking nuts actually. Pretty cool. Can't wait to see this on the car. Pick these guys off. Oh, this is gonna be fun. These things always break off. I have to razor all of these off. Yeah, no, that's right. Alright, I connected the header to the downpipe because I figured that'd be easier to do instead of trying to line this while it's on the car. Now the problem is it's gonna fit in the car. We got a pretty tight window here with the steering column in the way. Oh, so far so good. It's like turned all awkward. Dang it. It was hitting this O2 sensor, so we're gonna take this off real quick and then try again. It looks like a nice exhaust leak until we get it plugged, but we're just fitting this for now. Dang, it's in the steering column right now. Dang it. Well, unfortunately, it looks like the exhaust is hitting the floorboard here. So we're gonna take off the downpipe and then just try and fit the header on its own and go from there. Ooh, that's good news. This does fit. Looks like we have clearance too to the plate, and also pretty close to the steering shaft. But so close. We'll have to tighten it down to really know for sure, but so far so good. Flatter side or wider side goes towards the exhaust manifold. Chamfered side or the smooth side goes out. This header looks amazing. Really digging it. We'll have to figure out the downpipe situation later though. Next thing I want to do is figure out where I want to put these fuel lines, because I do not want it to be routed forward or over the exhaust manifold. So maybe we can try and pull this to route over here for now. Maybe we can put it above the brake booster. Maybe utilize this little clip here, and then they attach somewhere over here. Oh, right here. But before we start messing around with this area, I think it'd probably be the best idea to mount the brand new clutch master, clutch line, and the slave cylinder. Decided to go all OEM, obviously minus the clutch line. It's much nicer to use a braided line because you don't have to worry about bending it and all that kind of stuff. But might as well put these on real quick because if we mount this in the way of our clutch master, that's going to be a headache down the line. It even says Nissan on the side. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. And when I stripped that silver Z at the junkyard, I grabbed this little shim that was in between the clutch master and the firewall. I've never seen anything like this before. It's like a gasket, but it also has these spacers in it. I believe that is to bore out this hole to fit. Yeah, see? So glad I grabbed it, but also very strange. Never seen anything like this before. I really like this braided line, especially because of how the fitting is on the clutch master. It just looks nice, you know? Eventually I want to do it to the brake lines, but that's down the line. Since we're working with the clutch line, we might as well put on a new slave cylinder now. And this is an Exody slave cylinder, which they make a lot of OEM parts. I'm not sure if this is OEM to the car or not, but still good quality. So for this line, you got to put on this little fitting first. It's like an adapter. And we'll bleed this later. This is our temporary fuel line situation. I moved the fuel filter and return line back to this area around the clutch master before they were mounted up here and, you know, all the way up on the shock tower. I decided to tuck them so that we can angle it more towards the firewall. This is kind of what I came up with. This is not going to be forever. Ideally, long term, I'd like to move the fuel lines and brake lines from this side of the car to that side because they run along the bottom frame rail on the driver's side. And on an S chassis is actually on the opposite side. Now that we figured out the fuel lines, I think the very next thing I want to do is see if the stock 300ZX VG30 throttle cable will work on this KA. It's certainly long enough, that's for sure. On the VG, the throttle cable actually goes in the center of the engine. Kind of interesting. And it also opens two separate throttle bodies. Honestly, I think this is gonna work no problem. There's enough slack here that it'll even fit into the mount. It's not bolted in though, but wow. I wonder if this throttle cable is actually the same. It's the same length and everything. Yeah, this fits perfectly. Let's mount this correctly now and try this one out. Woo. That's a nice fit. Really good. Tighten this up before we forget. This is starting to feel like an actual working KA at this point. It's got a lot of goodies on it now. The next thing I want to figure out is the radiator and can I run a cooling fan? The KA cooling fan, the clutch fan. Because the clutch fan is superior to any electrical fan. This will always pull more air. If I can run it, I will. But before I put this on there, I'm gonna first test out if I can fit this radiator. Got a brand new coil radiator. I'm already noticing the bottom coolant port is on the right side, and I think the KA is supposed to be on the same side. Got one here, and then the other outlet is here. All right, just took this thing out of the package, and somehow there's already bent fins. Can never escape bent fins on these radiators, I swear. So to combat that, any further damage, I'm gonna duct tape some cardboard onto it. Oh yeah, got the hoses. Is this supposed to be that bumped out here? I feel like it's not. It's definitely gonna hit. So I'm used to on 240s, you're able to pull the radiator flush with the core support, but it looks like we have a harness that sticks out too far, and that's honestly in the correct location. I mean, it's not like this can go in any further. It'll hit the hood latch. But luckily we have another Z here to go off of for reference. Oh yeah, it's definitely gapped out.
Although I did delete the AC, the condenser.
Oh really? Yeah. Dang, these are beefy brackets. A whole finger's width.
So much more room here than that straight floor.
What, here?
Yeah, than that's like the straight floor cylinder.
Yeah, the KA goes out to like here, I feel like.
Right?
Like this is farther back.
But there's just less room on each side.
Right, you cannot work on anything with the VG. Let's get a cleaner view of an engine bay. Yeah, see, you can just... Both sides. Oh man, this side has so much space. But yeah, the KA does come a lot more forward than the VG.
Yeah.
I wonder if the fan is going to fit. This is, I guess, a rough estimate.
Yeah, honestly, it looks like this is in the proper spot.
Yeah, right? The studs line up.
Yeah.
Wiggling the fan on, it's already a great sign. That's definitely going to work out in our favor here. Wow, it's actually perfect. You can actually put your hand in between it. Oh, this is loose. What is this supposed to be? A coolant port sensor or something? Oh, maybe to bleed it. No, but you'd usually use the cap.
Maybe a sensor?
I feel like a sensor goes here though. Now I want to start working on the wiring. Now if you guys remember when I first got this car running, I had all these pins jumped from the KA engine harness into the Z engine room harness. Now I mentioned I wanted to make a jumper harness, which basically would entail no wires being cut between the two harnesses. Throughout my recent junkyard hauls, I found these connectors. This one is the interface harness, which basically gives the cluster its information from the S13 to the Z32. We'll worry about that one later. These are the ones we're going to worry about today. So these two, I already labeled them because I didn't want to get them confused. These are from a 300ZX, so these are actually the engine harness plugs from a Z to the VG, which obviously is not in here. So those will plug into here. These two are from an S13 KA. This is also from the engine room harness. So these will plug in to the KA harness. I'll plug this one in to the Z. Boom, connectors match. Then we match the wires. Now the wire colors are not going to be the same for what the wires do. If you guys also remember, I made an entire pinout sheet, went through each pin, discovered what each wire does and labeled it. Anyways, I can't find that sheet, but luckily I took a picture of it, so I have it right here. So I'm gonna have to go over what to do and what pins to jump. So I hope that all made sense, but basically we're just making this connect. That's as simple as I can put it. We're connecting wires. And this is how it looks right now. I did twist them together. Usually I don't like to do that, but this is just a very temporary start because we have to reconfirm that we have everything connected in the right way. And then I will also show you guys how I'll make this look a lot cleaner. Our first priority right now is just to get the car on the ground and having it move under its own power. And I'm actually missing one of these plugs, which is the main power to the chassis. So I need to go find that so that I don't have to jump as many pins as I did last time. But until then, we're gonna bleed the clutch since the car is in the air still. And we can honestly probably take it off the jack stands. I don't think there's as much else we need to do under the car other than the fact that we don't have the lower radiator hose, but we can, you know, there's so much room here with the KA now that won't be an issue whatsoever. Something I totally forgot about is the shift linkage. I don't know if I can install this with the shifter still on it or not, or if I need to drop the transmission a little bit to fit it, but I guess there's only one way to find out. I guess the first thing I can do is cut off these zip ties that I had on to hold on this drive shaft stub. Alright, I guess we'll see if this fits. Slide this up here. Got it. Jeez, it's a mess in here. I cannot wait to clean this thing out. But hey, look, we got a shifter. Are these rare for 300ZXs? The sunroof shades? They're extremely rare for S13s. And this goes here. Yo, is that what I think it is? My long lost ratchet and 10mm. I thought I left this at the junkyard. Nice, now I have two, and it's brand new. Sweet, shifter's good to go. And now we're gonna bleed the clutch. We're letting it gravity bleed first. It kind of takes up most of the air that's in the line. Got a drain pan under here. And just letting it bubble out. Alright. The clutch system is fully bled. That's ready to go. Now I think the next thing we want to do is put on the drive shaft. Now the transmission does have fluid in it. So if we take out the drive shaft plug as it is now, it'll all pour out. So what we're thinking is drop the front down to the ground, and then we'll jack up the rear, because that will ensure that the fluid in the transmission is being, you know, pushed forward and it won't pour out. I'm excited to put this thing on the ground, even though it's going back up in the air, but it's been a long time since I've seen this thing on the ground. Stock height.
Monster jam.
We're ready. Stick a whole head in there. All right, we laid some towels down just in case some fluid comes out, but we're gonna try and make this as quick as possible. Oh, no fluid so far. Well, it was too dark to film the rest of the drive shaft install, but basically the drive shaft that we were putting on ended up being too short. And luckily I kept the automatic drive shaft that came with this car when I bought it, because we ended up swapping the rear piece only. Because you can actually unbolt the center of the drive shaft and take off the rear end, and then we put on the 2+2 automatic rear half of the drive shaft, and it ended up working. I didn't think it would, but I was like, you know what, we might as well try. Now let's begin the wiring. We've already jumped the pins on this side. We have to re-verify that those are good. Now I'm working on the transmission / lower harness side. I'm sorry if I sound a little stuffy. The pollen is insanely high today, and the neighbor just mowed his lawn, and my allergies are killing me. Whew, I'm about to sneeze. What I did over here to start was strip all of the tape and shielding from the harness. So now I can see everything that's going on. Right off the bat, we have the positive alternator plug, and this actually, believe it or not, fits directly into the Z harness. Insane. Now I cannot confirm if that second pin is for the alternator, but I mean, it's kind of safe to assume they're both 90s Nissans. I'm sure they use the same connector setup, but we're gonna wait to put that on until we know for sure, because I do actually have the automatic trans / lower harness for a Z. And another shout out to Peyton, the Z parts plug. So we're gonna compare this harness in a second. And there's a couple other plugs on the KA harness that I'm looking at. This one, I think, actually plugs in near the fuse box on the 240. It contains 4 wires. This one is oil pressure switch. White with the red stripe is alternator signal. And these two, yellow with black and then yellow with green, are for the speed sensor. So that's good to know. We'll have to see if we can pin these out to one of the connectors on here. This plugs directly into the alternator, and that's where you get your alternator white with the red stripe. But this one plugs into the body. Interesting. And this black with the yellow stripe is a starter signal, which we already have figured out. So this is the super greasy alternator that I pulled off of the KA, this exact KA. So let's match up some of the plugs. So this plug is the KA alternator plug. I'm curious if the Z alternator plug is the same. I believe it's this one. Let's see if the pins are in the right orientation. Thick white on the left, white with the red stripe on the right. No way. Okay, well that one works. Next is the black plug. This is the alternator positive to the black plug for the 240SX harness. Now on the Z harness, the black plug has 2 white wires in it. I'm pretty sure this single ring terminal is supposed to be the alternator connection. You can actually see the witness mark of where that rubber grommet was supposed to be. You can probably just move this over to that one. But there are 2 white wires in this one single port. So honestly, it looks like the Z harness is pretty similar to the KA harness. So what I think I'm gonna do is end up using this portion, at least so far. And it looks like the rest of this stuff was for other Z things that we will not be needing. This looks like the oil pressure sensor for the Z. Starter signal, we already have that. Okay, perfect. Last but not least, we gotta figure out this plug. So this is the 240 plug. This one has the alternator, oil temp, and speed sensor in it. And for the Z, it looks like this. Although I don't think the speed sensor is built into this plug. But it does have the alternator wires and the oil pressure switch. So we're gonna have to splice into this connector. But I do believe that there is enough connectors that are the same that we can run this for now just to get it on a test drive. So that means we need to install this alternator. The original alternator bolt did not have the nicest threads. So my homie Devin Stearns gave me his spare. Perfectly mint. Thank you, Devin. So let's slap this alternator in and then connect the harness. It goes all the way down there. Where did it go? Oh, it's already on there. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to install the belt onto the alternator because I cannot find the water pump pulley. And honestly, I don't know if I want to dig through this right now. Yeah. We don't need that to drive around the block, do we? Nah. Same with the radiator. Because I also don't have the radiator hoses yet. They didn't come in. I want to get this window installed too. It's so annoying. Now this car still is kind of a mission to start. First thing we got to do, plug in the terminal. And I noticed my brake switch failed because the brake lights are always on now. Add that to the list. This should all be fine. Nothing's open over here. This is gonna look hilarious. It's gonna have some wires sticking out the side, and all the wires are connected on this side that need to be connected, and I wrap them in a towel individually so that they do not touch metal or each other. Not that it would really matter because they're all 12 volts, but that's just a good habit to have. And the power to run the entire engine is coming from this horn fuse. But there's no radiator, no speed sensor, no coolant sensor, no coolant, no reverse lights, no exhaust, no bolts holding in the front end, no alternator, no battery hold down, no air filter. But other than those few things, this car is ready to rock. This doesn't look sketchy, does it? And for those of you questioning those wires, there's no power going to them, so they're actually not doing anything. Looks worse than it actually is. We got a security light going off. Someone must be stealing the dang thing. Oh, no shifter. And lastly, we need to jump the fuel pump. Okay, now it's ready to start. First try. Oh, can't forget to put the e-brake down. Oh, we're rolling. We're rolling. Honestly, this is not bad to steer without power steering. So loud. It sounds so healthy though. It's idling fine. Success. It moves. Now I didn't want to drive it too far because obviously there's no coolant in there. We don't want to blow it up just yet. It's pretty awesome to think that in the beginning of this video there was no drivetrain in this car and now it's running and driving. And also looks clean. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for Z content and I apologize that it took so long for this video to come out. I was trying to grind to get the 240 ready for that drift event and luckily it made it to the drift event and performed amazing. So thank you guys for sticking around. Don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe to see more. And you guys already know what's coming next. We gotta fine tune this thing so we can actually drive it around. New daily. Who dis?